sessions. So we try to talk about...
I think we're going live anyway now. So while everybody gets logged on, I'll just take a moment to introduce myself. So for those of you that don't know me, have not seen me on LinkedIn or been to one of our events before, my name's Sarah James. I'm a senior recruitment consultant at Transition Partners. So Transition Partners specialize in technology and digital recruitment. I'm based in our Berlin office and I look after the German market. So we usually run a number of tech events throughout the UK and Berlin, and we thought it would be a good excuse to carry these on virtually. So we've done a number of virtual events already. And for this event, we have people joining from all over, which is great. So I'm hoping we have a good diverse audience and a good range of questions coming in. Questions are encouraged as well, so please ask these in the Q&A box. We want to make this as interactive as possible. So you can ask these at any point, and Italo is going to monitor these and ask them to the panelists when the opportunity arises. Also, just to let everybody know, we're going to be recording the event and it will be available on our YouTube channel at the end afterwards as well. So we'll get started. I will hand over to Italo to make the introductions.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Sarah. Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Italo. I am the CTO at Lykon. Previously in Berlin, I worked at HelloFresh as a director of engineering and then N26. And I finally moved on to Lykon, where I work today for about a year. Yeah, we have multiple different technologies at Lykon that I can share afterwards. But for now, I'd just like to go around and maybe everybody can introduce yourself. Let's start with maybe Thomas.
This Thomas, or one of the 35 participants? I assume it's this one. So,
yes, exactly.
Yeah, my name's Tom Bradford. I'm the director of engineering at Blacklane. I've been there for about 2.5 years. And prior to that, I was at Zalando for a couple of years and various other companies. I'm very old and I have a very long, illustrious career, so it's not worth going into.
Cool. All right. Maybe Nischal?
Okay, hi everybody, good evening. I'm Nischal, I'm the VP of Engineering and Data Science at Omnius. I'm not that old, so I'm, I've been working here for more than 3 years now. Before Omnius was even Omnius, I joined another company that sort of pivoted into Omnius. I've had experience building data science products for the last 8-9 years now in different ecosystems. And I'm actually very happy to be here. So thank you guys for having me. Yeah, I'm looking forward to a fun conversation today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for being here. It's going to be super cool. Ilya, maybe we can go with you now.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Ilya. I'm currently working as VP of Engineering at TaxFix. Before that, when I moved to Berlin like 4 years ago, I joined the region Goyero that got renamed into Omio. I've been doing there all the DevOps cloud stuff. And before that, a bunch of various SaaS providers, e-commerce and stuff like that. Thanks for having me here.
Cool, thank you for being here. And Raj, our last but not least.
Hello, I'm Raz. Also very similar to Tom, I'm very old, and unlike Tom, I lost my hair, so kudos to you for keeping yours. I'm a director of engineering at DeliveryHero for the past 6 months. Before that, I was the head of engineering at Wikimedia Germany, which is the organization that operates Wikipedia, Wiktionary, and many others. And before that, I kind of been around, had my own failures as startups and worked for other people's failures, meaning startups. Yeah, I've been a DeliveryHero for a while, and I can share a bit of, I don't know, decisions that we made recently even with Talking Tech Stack.
Amazing, really good. Really looking forward to that. Cool, and I can share with you that I'm also losing my hair, so we're in the same path. We're good. All right, so maybe I can start by just talking a little bit about the tech stack that we have at Lykon and decisions that why we've come to the state that we're currently in. So basically, Lykon is powered by Kubernetes. So we're running our infrastructure in Kubernetes today in AWS. And the reason for Kubernetes for us was mainly because we were comfortable with the technology already from previous experiences. And we decided, well, okay, we have a lot of experience in that already, so let's go with what we're more comfortable with. And so far, so good. We don't have many problems in Kubernetes, and we're liking it. Our backend stack is mainly running on Go, also because we were more comfortable with the language. But all of us in the company actually came from a different stack. We actually came from PHP a few years ago. And we moved, especially when I was at HelloFresh, we moved into Go. And it was really fun, to be very honest. So we started working on that. And eventually, at Lykon, I also wanted to bring the Go opportunity to everybody to, start changing from PHP to Go, because they wanted to do that. And we don't regret it. It was really good. The learning curve is a challenge there. If you come from, interpreted languages and you go to a compiled language, there's some learning curve in there. But I think most of people actually went well through this path. So our backend today is powered by around 50 microservices. So we don't have a huge amount of services, but also it's not small. So we have to manage all the communication, all the monitoring patterns, the SRE standards that we apply in the company as well. So basically what we have there is that we run in Istio inside Kubernetes as well for a service mesh. So we can have all of these services talking together, let's say in an okay way. But Istio was a challenge for us because it's a cutting edge technology and there's a lot of flaws in the design still being kind of fixed. So it was something that we decided to go with, and it was great, but of course, we faced a lot of challenges there. And in the front-end area, we have React Native, basically for us, our apps, and also in React in the web area, mainly because React Native for us, because we're a small company, makes sense because we don't have to have iOS developers and Android developers. We can invest in front-end developers that turned into mobile world, which for us worked really well because we couldn't invest much in having two teams, one for iOS, one for Android. So we decided, okay, let's go with React Native. The community is very good and is very, is very receptive. We also contributed a lot to the open source code, especially the Apple sign-in, which was recently out. So we had to actually work out in that. And it was great. It was great. It helped us a lot. And so far, so good. I think the challenges that we have in our tech stack today are more regarding, recruiting. I think it's the main one for us, especially in times like this, in times where the COVID is there. Recruiting went a little bit slower than we actually wanted. And our recruiting process is also because we have to focus on the Go community and also in the React community. React is not really a problem. There is a lot of people into React right now, which is great. But here in Berlin, Go, I saw it in a few companies already. And I would like to hear from you guys as well, like which kind of tech stacks you have and if Go is in there, because it would be super cool to share some experiences. And, but mainly I saw Go in N26 on the infrastructure team. And I saw Go in HelloFresh basically on the backend team. In Berlin, that's basically my experience with the community around that. Aside from that, the rest is Java that I saw, at least in N26 was 100% Java, or JVM, sorry. But yeah, I mean, that's about Lykon in a super nutshell. But I would definitely like to hear a little bit more. Maybe we can go with Ilya. Yeah, if you don't mind, maybe sharing a little bit of your experience.
Yeah, sure. But before I start talking about Go, yeah, I think we have some services written in Go at Omio. So I don't know if there are any folks from Omio there. They can probably speak up and ask some questions. So about our tech stack, I actually prepared like a small presentation. Don't be worried, it's a very short one, 3 slides only. For those of you who are like not from Germany, here in Germany, like It's a big pain, taxes. So everyone hates tax declaration, and everyone likes the refund. So we try to solve this problem for our users. So yeah, that's pretty ugly, and I think we have a really nice solution for that. This is very high level architecture. It's very simple. The product is really young. So the company is, I think, the product is 3 years old. We started very, very light with an app that even the original idea, original concept was to make it even working offline, so you can have all the calculation and stuff done on the client side. Then over time it evolved, and of course we started to moving all this logic to the backend, but it's really simple. You have the app that is React Native. You have most of the kind of core functionality and question flow, because that involves rule engine, knowledge base, reasoning engine. All of that is written in pretty exotic language called Elixir. Community is probably even smaller than Go here in Berlin, but it's really strong. They're always coming together, helping each other. So I'm really impressed how community is organized here in Berlin and Elixir. And then the rest of the services like backend processing, some kind of APIs, it's all written in Node.js. So that's basically allow us to build quickly and have cross-functional team, really cross-functional team, and people coming from like backend kind of background can easily contribute to front end and vice versa. And I think that creates a really nice collaborative environment internally. And yeah, then what we have on top, yeah, React Native, we do have some back offices, and actually we do have web app written in React. It's not the same code base. Yeah, then backend is Node.js. We're also running on Kubernetes. I have a pretty good experience with Kubernetes myself, like going through this migration to Kubernetes at Omni, and we also using cloud, Google Cloud, because it's kind of, they go hand in hand with Kubernetes in my opinion. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Cool. All right.
Talking challenges, I don't know. They are probably not really technical ones. Most of the challenges that we face as a product organization, they are mainly coming from our nature of our business. It's very seasonal. You have a very short season. Many of the approaches that you might have in other product organizations just does not work here in this business. Yeah, but that's probably another topic.
No, that's good actually. I saw that your stack is mainly, well, you're mainly running with JavaScript, right? So, yep. Which allows you to have, at least allows you to have, as you said, cross-functional teams, which are pretty good. But okay, so how you have your teams split? Like, do you say cross-functional teams, but how do you handle, for instance, infrastructure work, right? Like, you have a team that is responsible for infrastructure, or is this part of a shared DevOps culture that you have? How do you handle these kind of things there?
Yeah, till recent time, we had 0 DevOps engineers in the company, and all those responsibilities were shared within DevOps community, as we call. So there is people who do have those skills, and they help each other kind of to get stuff deployed. And because the core of the team, even before I joined, they already had experience with Kubernetes, they created like a first setup themselves, and then the rest will be building on top. So now we have a couple of DevOps engineers join the team, and they helping to bring it to the next level. But still already knowledge and the responsibility is already there. Culture is set in that way.
Absolutely. Got it. And you mentioned also you have Elixir right there, right? And maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the Elixir area, because you have Elixir community is pretty famous actually, which is very nice. But I didn't know actually there was some companies using here in Berlin, so that's actually really nice to hear. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the Elixir, like what exactly you use it for, and how your teams handle it.
Yeah, so the core of our technology is, maybe it's a little bit like a step back. So if you wanted to implement tax logic, it involves a bunch of, you need to implement a bunch of rules. So if you take the law, it's like that thick book, and you need to codify all this knowledge and all this logic and implement somehow in the code. So we started with this approach, of course, and then we realized that probably not going to scale. We created our domain-specific language. We call it TaxML. That can be understood by humans and a computer, of course, and that's the language we use to define all this task logic. So basically, tax engine and the workbench, the IDE that is used for this TaxML, it's all written in Elixir, and what it does, it basically takes all this logic written in TaxML, parses it, creates a in-memory graph database, and then also controlled by question flow. The moment you give an answer, it creates a graph and then gives you better suggestion of what the next answer gonna be and how your tax calculation and tax situation should look like. So all of that is written in Elixir. Yeah.
That's really good.
And the main reason why I'm pretty sure this decision been made before I joined because of, again, the core of the team. They were familiar with this technology. They kind of liked it, and there was a good fit, really. And I still think it's a good fit. Yeah, just working for us.
Got it. Yeah, that's really good. I have a question here from Dirk Hesse. Is there any usage of AI at TaxFix?
No, not at the moment. Everyone is coming as a new joiner. There was always like wondering about this topic. Everyone has a bunch of ideas how we can use it, how we can better suggest, better optimize the tax situation for every individual. Of course, there are some limitations from GDPR and privacy perspective, but of course, there will be some products going live on this area soon.
Cool, awesome. And yeah, I mean, like, maybe now let's talk a little bit about the recruiting side of things. I know that Node and normally JavaScript is quite okay to recruit, especially in Europe overall. But I don't know about like Elixir, for instance, if you have developers that are specific hired for that, or if they share the knowledge across other teams.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So we have some people, they originally come in even from JavaScript background, like backend, and they at some point decided to learn Elixir, and they have a little bit of experience, so they can do both. Of course, we have the core of the team, the people who are specializing in this language, and because community is relatively small, and you have a product that, or a culture, a company with a great culture and great product that is there, that automatically attracts the best of the talents from the market. And I think that works for us really well. So even though the community is really small, that plays in a good way for us. Yeah, that's how we think we solve it.
That's nice. Yeah, absolutely. And well, I think most of the answers you gave it already, but there's a question here as well. Like yeah, Nino Chalari, he asks, how do you deal with the challenges of the product itself, since tax declarations are usually made just once a year? And what about the gap between those recurring taxes declarations?
Yeah, actually, I know that many people don't have a good knowledge, extensive knowledge about taxes, but specifically in Germany, everyone is under impression that there is a deadline, it lasts till, I don't know, end of May, and then the story is over. It's actually not quite right. For many cases, only like 30% of population need to file by that deadline. The rest can file up to September, I think. I'm not an expert really, but so the tax season is much longer actually. That is one, and of course that's the core of our business, and we're trying to use it for best. Like, of course, it comes with some limitations. You cannot do extensively A/B testings because, well, you have all the people coming in like 1 month, right? And like you need to deal with that. And of course, but that also comes with the good things. You can run like seasonal cadence in the company, where you're getting ready for the season, you're thinking how you can get better for the next season. It gives like a really natural breather for your team that you can invest into some technology in the meantime while getting ready for the next season. So it has some really good advantages actually. Yeah, and another answer to that would be, there are some categories of users, they would like to use our app apart from just submitting taxes. on the day-to-day basis, on the weekly basis. So yeah, we are ultimately going there.
Got it. Cool. All right. There is actually another question here from Klaus, but that's to me, but I'll hand it over to you back then. Here the question is, what was your approach to help engineers to transition from PHP to Go? And that's a very good question. I started getting experience into that, especially when I was at HelloFresh. We had to develop a way for our developers to study and still be productive, but study a new language and put it in production, right? I think what helped a lot at the time was we had very good standards about how a service should look like, independent of the language. And for us, basically, what we did is that we had a program for our backenders where, there is a way for us to always report monitoring into our Prometheus cluster, for instance, or there is a way for us to do gRPC communication. And because of that, it was easy transition. It was just a syntax transition and also a mindset transition when moving from PHP to Go. So we had a program where developers could subscribe to and at HelloFresh. And basically you had a project that you wanted to migrate from PHP to Go, or a new project depending on our team, or a new project that you could apply Go to. And you had support from people that already had the Go background. So that comes from our platform team at HelloFresh. And the platform team had more experience with Go already from like a few years before. And they helped the product teams actually engage into Go. So more and more people at HelloFresh start doing that. In the end, I remember when I left, we had about 109 services across the whole stack, where about, I think, 80 were Go already, which was a huge victory for us, because people were getting engaged and they found it was very, very nice to actually play around with Go. So that would be my answer in a nutshell there. But now, Ilya, I have another question here from, I'm not exactly sure from who, but is it Google Cloud Help?
Oh, I think that's a continuation of the previous part of the question. Like, how do you handle a lot of an application? I think it's not much different from any retail or e-commerce where you have like seasons like Christmas or Black Friday or Cyber Monday. It's not much different. So yeah, you invest upfront into auto scaling, you invest upfront into load testing, invest into monitoring and alerting, and that usually helps.
Cool. All right. Sounds good. Cool. All right. And I think there's another question here. Normally you, I don't think it's a question.
Yeah, that's the answer to the question. Yeah, those are the categories of users that would like to use our app or would like to use our app on a weekly basis.
Exactly. Cool. So actually I have a question now, which is regarding more like SRE. So it's more regarding site reliability. And if you have that in TaxFix, if you have some sort of SRE, or how do you handle monitoring or outages if they happen in your stack? How do you handle that?
Yeah, that's another advantage of having seasonal business. So you can just organize for that just for the season, and then for the rest of the year, you don't have it. You enjoy just a peaceful life and just...
That is true. That helps a lot.
Yeah. Cool. So usually when it comes to season, we have refreshing. So
you prepare beforehand.
We're refreshing our on-call policies. We're refreshing knowledge of the people, making sure everything is in place. And yeah, it's not always perfect, but we're trying to do our best.
Got it. All right, that's good. That's good to hear. Cool. All right. So I don't see much more questions here, to be very honest. Is there anybody else that would like to ask a question for Ilya from TaxFix? If there is, please, you can use the Q&A or the chat. I'm monitoring both, do my best. But yeah, not really. Maybe someone from the participants, do you have any questions for Ilya that you'd like to ask? Curiosities?
I would love to know about Elixir more. I'm gonna hit you up, Ilya. I will.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I'll do the same.
I'm gonna pick your brain on it.
Cool.
Thanks,
All
everyone.
right. Cool. So thank you very much, Ilya. It was really nice, really good insights. I think we can move on now to Tom from Blacklane.
Sure. Okay, so as for our tech stack, I'm gonna sound like a cliche, a Berlin cliche, right? And so like so many companies in Berlin, we started off just coding in x86 assembler and compiling down to bare metal, and the box is behind me. Does that sound right? No, it doesn't. No, actually, we started off as a Ruby on Rails shop, like so many Berlin startups. And like so many Berlin startups, this is about 9 years ago, the goal was to get a product to market and in front of people's faces as fast as possible and at any cost. That was essentially the idea. And of course, when you do that, you accumulate technical debt, you make choices on behalf of productivity rather than sort of longevity. And those are the trade-offs that you tend to make. And like so many companies, we also took too long to actually find that inflection point for when we should get away from that stack and start to sort of decompose it and decouple it. And we've been paying for that for a few years, but we're mostly out of it at this point. Up until a couple years ago, we were mainly Ruby on Rails, or actually just Ruby with Sinatra, and queuing things with Sidekick, using your standard MySQL or Postgres databases, building everything out on top of Ansible, deploying to EC2 instances directly, sizing them wrong. And it sounds familiar, I'm sure. So what we've been doing over the past few years is we've been transitioning. So we've been decoupling our systems. We've been migrating to Kubernetes as well. Originally self-hosted because EKS didn't exist, but now we're on the cusp of actually moving over to EKS as well. And we've started to decouple in a less of a spaghetti integration sort of way over the last year as well. So early on, it would have been microservices that you're making direct RESTful calls to. We're now investing pretty heavily in evented architecture as well, which is what you're seeing here. And yeah, I mean, that's basically the story. We pretty much have a polyglot stack at this point. Obviously, there's still a lot of Ruby on Rails, well, just Ruby floating around. But we do have some Go stuff ramping up. We've had Elixir services built. I don't know if any are in production anymore, but we have done it. For sure, there's Node.js floating around. There's TypeScript being written. As far as our mobile applications, we tend to implement those natively. So our iOS app is actually built with Swift. Our Android app is built with Kotlin, and we don't go with things like React Native or Flutter for the passenger-facing app, but it may be that we actually will deal with those things for like apps for our suppliers and for the chauffeurs, because they have a little more tolerance for that kind of an interface, whereas your paying customers are the ones who have no tolerance whatsoever. That's it. I mean, that's it at a very high level. And a lot of this is coming from kind of a general philosophy I have about building out systems. And like, for me, there are three things that you tend to consider. And there's the economic aspect of it. And so for a company that starts off in Ruby on Rails early on and just accumulates massive amounts of technical debt, that is a perfectly valid way to start a company, right? Because you're accumulating this debt, and there's a 9 out of 10 chance that you're never going to have to pay it back because your company will fail, right? You'll run out of runway, and therefore that debt doesn't have to be paid. Much like the way EasyJet right now is trying to convert all of their flights to vouchers. So the point is to find that place where you actually have to transition. You have to basically say, hey, this business model stuck, right? We've been throwing shit at the wall and it finally stuck, and now we know what we can go with. And that's the point where you actually start to build it out right. right? So there's the, you know, the make it work, make it right, make it fast model of software development, get it to work, and then actually make it robust, make it scalable, make it composable. That's the next phase. And Blacklane's deep in that next phase. It may be that we never get to the make it fast phase, and most companies should never find themselves at that phase, quite honestly. And for those who are about to ask, the make it fast is to sort of optimize the hell out of things. And why? There's a strong argument that you shouldn't have to do that because that actually drives you in the wrong direction as a company to a certain degree. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it from a high level. We govern ourselves, so it's not pure ad hocery as far as the polyglot environment. It's not anarchy. I'm an anarchist, but I wouldn't suggest that anybody should just go and do what they want. There's a certain amount of responsibility that comes with the autonomy of deciding what you're going to do. So we do have a tech radar that governs our decisions. Everything that's in the adopt ring we can safely use because we know that there are people internally that would support it. And everything else is a trial or an adoption phase, and not an adoption phase, but like an assessment phase. And those things should have a pretty small blast radius, right? So you build them out and you make sure that when they do blow up, because they will, they don't take the business down with them. That's our general approach to building out systems at this point.
Cool, all right, that's really good. You have a very, a very broad technology stack. You've been through Swift and Kotlin, and have a little bit of Go, Ruby on Rails, and a lot of other things. And you're now moving to EKS. And I have a question here also from the audience, from Hemant Kuma, which it's basically, you said that you're migrating to Kubernetes, right?
Yep.
And is there any learnings that you can share of migrating to Kubernetes? Because it's a challenging thing for when you come from a company that doesn't have this stack so far. So what can you share there?
So the biggest challenge going to Kubernetes is that it's kind of the mutability of the services. So let me maybe explain that a little bit more, is that when you develop a service, it should be as stateless as possible, right? So that you can actually scale out horizontally. And what ends up happening inevitably if you build big monoliths is that they become very stateful, right? They're very dependent on the operational internal state of that monolith. And as a result, they don't lend themselves very well to a system like Kubernetes. They just don't, because you need the elastic scaling capability, and yet at the same time, your instances are very, very stateful. That's one of the biggest challenges, is sort of reassessing your overall architecture and how data flows through your architecture and making it as stateless as possible. And you shift the state transitions out of those services and it becomes far more manageable. I think that's the hardest part.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only add to that. Just to complete the question here, Hemant also asked, for me in this case, you mentioned that you're using Kubernetes with 50 services, and at what point you decided to introduce Kubernetes? So here, actually, we had Kubernetes before we actually broke down the monolith. Our first challenge, as Thomas just mentioned, was when you have a monolith application and you have a lot of state going on, migrating that to Kubernetes is super challenging. So in our case, of course, we still have our monolith application running. It's a PHP application running on Symfony 4. So it's not that old, actually. It's not so bad. We can still maintain it. And but the main challenge here, we said, okay, we have Kubernetes. We want to migrate pieces of this monolith into our Kubernetes cluster. The challenge for us in Kubernetes was we have to automate everything, because if Kubernetes goes down, if a node goes down, you need to have everything automated so you can actually bring it up, so you can actually put the Helm charts in Kubernetes, in an easy way. And that was the hardest part for us. Today we use Terraform to bring into EKS in AWS, which works really well. And we use Helm to deploy every single application to Kube, which so far so good. In case it goes down, we can deal with it in an easy way with a small team, right? In a small scale. So actually, there's something you mentioned, Tom, which I am very interested in knowing a little bit more, especially because your shirt, I have the same shirt, the Kafka shirt. And you said you have some event-driven going on, right? Some event-driven architecture going on.
Yep.
Why did you choose, and I assume you chose Kafka, but why did you choose Kafka, not something like Kinesis from AWS, if you're running on AWS, I'm sorry, or Rabbitmq, or something else?
We're running on AWS. So Rabbitmq, we had already considered it. I think some of the properties of Rabbitmq were undesirable for us, and specifically the retention capability of Rabbitmq, because it's a traditional message queuing system, right? And so you have sort of a chicken and egg problem with traditional message queuing systems, where if you're going to build a service in the future, it cannot benefit from a queue that doesn't exist yet, right? And so the nice thing about Kafka is that you have the ability to retain things infinitely. Now, depending on the application, you don't necessarily want to do that, but you actually can do it. And for the kind of volumes that we're using to event source things, it actually works really, really well. And some of the big arguments have been like, well, it wasn't designed for that. Well, yeah, it wasn't. But part of the complexity of Kafka is that there's this logic that will take your spans and just throw them away in the future. If you have infinite retention, you actually eliminate a huge amount of the complexity of what Kafka's doing, right? And so at that point, you're just starting from scratch, and you're capable of projecting your internal data representation from nowhere. I mean, you should snapshot, of course, because it'd be really, really slow. That was mainly it. For me, it was about that property, the ability to stand up a service in the future and have it benefit from the entire history of events that have been created in the past, so that there's consistency across the board, and to get away from the one-off migrations that happen all the time if you don't do things like that. So I don't know about you, but if you've been decoupling systems, inevitably what you have to do in a microservices environment is you have to create your own internal isolated persistence mechanism for the microservices, because that's a rule, right? And then you have to pump data into it from some original source, right? And so that's now a completely separate mechanism from the mechanism that you're going to use going forward. You've basically introduced 2 points of failure. From my point of view, it's actually better to have the one point of failure, the single mechanism that validates both on sort of enqueuing the initial state of the microservices, but then the ongoing state as the state starts to transition through. That's mainly why Kafka was chosen. And it was actually another one of those situations where we voted. So it was a democratic vote. I made a really hard case of why we should consider it, and what properties it has that other systems don't have, like SNS SQS, for example, and Rabbitmq. And we decided on that as well. But we could have gone with anything that had the properties that we needed. I mean, ultimately, we would abstract that out as well.
Like, yeah, definitely. I really like the way that you face Kafka and why you chose it. I think it was really good. It was really well explained. In our case, we use Kinesis from AWS, which is working well. But of course, we have the retention problem, like you mentioned. And Kinesis has a 2-week retention tops, which is terrible. So we cannot have that as a source of truth. And we have some event source application going on as well. So when you have that and you don't have Kafka, which is built for that, you suffer a little bit. So we are also migrating to Kafka at some point. But it's really good to hear this kind of experience. I'm also very curious about one thing you just mentioned, which is apparently you have a framework on the way you choose technology, or because you have a polyglot system, but you also have, as you mentioned, like some sort of restrictions where people can just not go run wild and choose whatever they want. So how is this framework? How do I, for instance, if I'm part of your team, how can I propose to use a technology, or how this framework actually works?
Sure. Well, it's a tech radar, right? So you could just go to ThoughtWorks and you can just steal even their app for managing the tech radar. But how stuff finds its way into the tech radar is through guilds. So we have a back-end guild, a front-end guild, an architecture guild, and a data guild, where people who are part of those functions will come together to talk about the decision to adopt a new technology or trial it and so on. And basically present that to the rest of the group, and the group will sort of hash it out to make decisions as to whether or not it even makes sense. and then also to pick it apart, right? Because developers love to pick things apart. That's kind of what we do. That tends to be the process. And there's some decisions where I wouldn't necessarily leave them up to the developers alone. And they almost always revolve around sort of edge interfaces, right? And why I say that is that within a team, the autonomy of how you implement something is really, really important, because people need to feel that they own stuff. And of course, after the fact, they need to own it for real, like operate it and monitor it and answer to it. But the way that one team interacts with other teams is always going to be through some communication mechanism, an interface of some kind, APIs, and so on. And if you allow the teams to just go with whatever they want to do, you end up with a proliferation of competing technologies that make consuming that information actually rather difficult, right? And so one of the reasons we said we need to choose a single message bus of some kind is to avoid the problem of one team deciding they're going to use Rabbitmq to produce events, another team deciding that they're just going to go and write something to the end of a text file, and then another one saying, oh, we only write things to the database. That's how we communicate with the rest of the world. Any single team who needs to consume all three of those sources of information now has the burden of dealing with those choices, right? And so this is a place where the autonomy of one team encroaches upon the ability to deliver software for another team. And that's where leadership should step in and say, no, we need to come to a definitive decision about how we're going to communicate with each other. And it's only leadership who can really make that happen if the teams aren't communicating well to begin with. And our teams communicated relatively well, but they had a lot of different opinions. And once you're up into the 90+ person range, the number of opinions that enter the conversation are just a cacophony, and it's really hard to manage at that point.
Absolutely, yeah, that's true. There's something interesting that you mentioned there, especially like with the Tech Radar. And why did you choose Tech Radar as a tool? I don't know if it was you or if it was already there, but why Tech Radar from ThoughtWorks and not something else, for instance?
Partly because I'm lazy. So I came from Zalando. We had a Tech Radar there. It actually worked pretty well. So if you look at it at scale, I think at the time I left Zalando, we were 1,600 developers, and we were using a Tech Radar to govern our decisions. At that scale, it worked really well. I figured, okay, well, at a 50-person company, it should work pretty well as well. And it actually has worked pretty well.
That's good. Yes, I think that's a good recommendation for, whoever is in the leadership teams of tech teams, basically is to choose a way for you to streamline your tech stack decision, basically, and how to move forward with that. So I really appreciate that. Great. I don't think I got any extra questions there.
I have one, if you don't mind.
Okay, good. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think one challenge I have faced in this kind of multi-technological kind of environments is managing dependencies. And I think the way we approach TaxFix is that we trade dependencies. So if my team needs to deliver something and they need to touch someone else's service, they basically create have a whiteboard session. They discuss how they want to implement, and actually the team that want to have it implemented just go there and do that in their service, right? So that's kind of if I'm coming and there is like a language and technology that I never used, I'm a little bit in trouble. So how you manage that? Is it a problem at all for you?
It tends not to be. I mean, like I said, it's governed, right? So you don't just arbitrarily decide to use a certain technology. Usually people will come forward with an idea, and then other team members will say, well, that's garbage, or that's great, and it gets vetted to a certain degree. So we did experiments, but a lot of them don't stick, which is good. I mean, you should experiment. And from the point of view of the growth of an organization, you should always make sure that, of course, the decision should be sane, but the team should be sort of free to decide what they do, because otherwise you really don't have kind of a cultural path forward, right? And from the point of view of retention and hiring, it's it's actually a benefit. And it just shifts the responsibility of making sure that the right decisions are being made and the expectations are being communicated to the leadership, right? So it becomes harder for us to basically express to the team what we're trying to achieve, you know, what our greater purpose is, what the long-term goals of the organization are, and how those decisions might impact that long-term goal. We have to communicate those things.
Yeah,
right?
Of course. You lead by context in here.
Yeah.
And then the other one, so just to clarify, the team autonomy, like they are free to choose whatever technology that has no external interfaces, or it still needs to be discussed within the guild. Let's say I'm building the service that will be only used in kind of internally inside of my team.
Yeah, I mean, if a service is never going to see the light of day as far as the overall systems architecture is concerned, it's something where we wouldn't necessarily like balk at it, but we would still say that it probably should be governed by the tech radar. And the reason for that is because your average developer has something like a 2 to 3 year lifespan or shelf life at an organization. And that's normal. And it's part of the growth of a software developer. And you don't want to allow for software to be built that nobody's going to understand in a couple of years. So the team should own it. That's another sort of key thing, is that we don't, it's not that we stand for, it's not that we allow it, but we really encourage the teams to own the services that they create rather than the individuals within the team to own those services, because this is also a problem as far as the long-term ownership is concerned. But we do encourage to use the right tool for the job. So for example, if you went to a shop where we're a Ruby shop, but we're doing data science, you can't make the argument that you can actually perform good data science with Ruby. You're going to go with the tools that work really, really well, depending on the problems that you're trying to solve. And those tend to be Python. If you're using like Spark, you know, maybe even Scala. So it ultimately depends. But forcing those constraints on the team as an umbrella rule doesn't really make sense. You might want to constrain things at the problem level to help guide the decisions that are being made.
Cool.
Thanks.
All right, definitely. Okay, so thank you very much, Tom. We're going to move now to Nischal from Omni.
Hey, okay. Thank you, Tom. And Ilya, that was awesome stuff that you guys are doing. We are actually in a very different space. So we're not in the SaaS space at all. Not that we don't want to be, but we're building an AI-first product for the insurance space. Now, in the insurance sector, we're looking at big enterprise customers who are not going to be on the cloud. I mean, for them, being on the cloud is going to be probably 2023, 2025 vision to maybe move to the cloud, given all the privacy constraints that they have. Before I actually get into the tech stack, I mean, we had a few things to consider. We were in the B2B space. We are still quite a small team. We are a team of about, with all the data scientists, to DevOps engineers, backend, frontend, everybody, about 20 people on the team. And building a product in the insurance domain, we are actually building an AI product for automation of claims. So which means that it's not going to be a product where people are going to use on their phone. People are going to sort of expect kick-ass user experience point of it. It's actually getting dirty with their process. Now, when you have all of these fluctuations and sort of varied setups that are present, you're literally taking 21st century cutting edge technology with AI and deep learning systems into 18th century customers. And there's like, we have customers still running mainframes. We have customers running their own implementation of ERP systems. You're talking about RFCs, RPCs, and all of these systems that are not quite easy to work with. And insurance companies have a reason to run this. It's because for them, migrating from any of these legacy systems is very expensive. And as you would have seen the recent Twitter storm about finding COBOL programmers that are actually quite short in nature, insurance companies too have this situation where not all the knowledge resides in one team or one group. It's spread geographically, and it's very cumbersome for them to figure out what they want to bring in. And in that situation, if we as Omnius present, hey guys, look, we're cool. We are the AI guys, you know, we are awesome. We're going to make your life better. They're going to be like, yeah, but how are you going to work in our ecosystem? Because we ourselves are figuring out what to do. But we had to do what we were thinking of, our vision. So about 3 years ago, when we started on this journey, one of the first decisions that we did, even before we actually had something working, was to say, guys, if we have to test this out, we need to ensure we can actually take it to a customer irrespective of where they are. And I'm really talking about landscapes which do not even have internet access. Yeah, it's not even, so I'm going to tell a few horror stories there. We said, okay, you know what? We're going to be building AI systems. So which means by definition, we are polyglot. We have no way of running away from it. We can't expect to build computer vision and natural language processing systems in Java. That's not going to happen. So we said, okay, there's Python, there's some bash magic happening and C++ code behind. We need to have some workflow systems that we probably are going to write in Java. A lot of interactions are going to be API based rather than front-end based, because you're really talking about integrations. So we're going to be an API first product where you can do your AI stuff with API as well. And of course, on top of that, we built for the business users and for people working with the system, the front end as well. So we decided, okay, if we want to do this and we need the capability of running this proof of concept, proof of technology, making that progress into getting the foot in the door. The only shot we have with the team size, and 3 years ago, we were a team size of 5 people. Yeah. So, and we're talking about getting into big organizations. So we said, okay, we do Kubernetes. And then at that point, we are like, okay, so which means first we have to think about how do we want to structure our code and what is the philosophy that we want to work on. So the philosophy at that point in the organization and the team was, we were thinking big and we were being positive. We said, we're going to be successful as a seed funded company and we're going to make this through. So when that day happens, we shouldn't be restructuring and refactoring our code when it's actually for us to perform. So we said, okay, we go with Kubernetes and we go with Kubernetes for the fact that we can run it on the cloud in any provider that we want. We can run it in our office on on-premise infrastructure. We can run it on our laptop, and we can run it in any of the data centers that the insurance companies have. And once we did that, and the second philosophy for us was the fact that we won't have the time to go back and refactor our code. And I completely agree with Thomas here. And when he said you end up having tech debt, and you might never get into a situation where you need to clear the tech debt. So for us, the philosophy was more or less inspired from what I was following before on Pinterest, like how they build Pinterest is, it's seriously expensive to write good code, but it's extremely cheap to add more hardware. So we said, if you want to scale, we can horizontally scale at any given point in time. So Kubernetes and microservices are going to help us run in that direction. So we're going to just have those two philosophies where we can run anywhere and we can scale at any given point in time by throwing more hardware at it. Now, once we decided that, of course, we sort of had a bigger problem than all of this was the fact that we were in a space where privacy is of utmost concern, and no insurance company was going to give us data to train our models, which is when we did another decision where we said, you know what, we're going to run proof of concepts on friendly customers who are willing to give us some data where the sample is nowhere close to the population, but we're going to prove that our AI systems work, but give them the flexibility of being able to train AI models in their own world. Now, that was for us where we said, do we really want to do this? Where, we give people who've not done programming ever in their lives the capability to actually train deep learning models in any of the infrastructure that they had. We decided to go ahead with it. So we sort of built an ecosystem that we ship to our customers as part of the product, where depending on the problem wish to choose and what we can support at this point in time, they have the capability to train their own AI models for the tasks that we can solve at hand right now, and sort of use these models for prediction. So our third philosophy came in as we were progressing through the system, is to have an ML ops culture. So we've heard about DevOps, we've heard about GitOps, and in the recent times, we're hearing a lot, especially with data-centric focus and AI systems, the ML ops part of it. So the idea behind ML ops was that at any given point in time, we should be able to not just version our code, not just version our Docker containers, but we should be able to version the data that is being used to train and the models itself. And we sort of used a lot of open source technologies to manage that. So we're using MLflow. We sort of, at the point when we were really young, we were really adventurous and said, we're going to build something of our own. So we had some proof of concept that we put in. But then thanks to the community and us presenting a few things at conferences, we were pointed in different directions on some of the choices that we had to make. Apart from that, I mean, our tech stack is on the workflow orchestration side. We are looking at moving to an event-based system. We're evaluating things like ZB and Kafka, and we're sort of having some deathmatch in the organization and engineering team on what to take and what to choose. But currently, right now, we're working with Airflow, which is working quite well for us because we are more a throughput-based system than a real-time based system. So that's working quite well for us. We deal with a lot of unstructured data through documents. I mean, so we're predominantly a file system-based software stack with, of course, we have a database where we store metadata and the state of the system and stuff, but everything is basically a stateless system, including the AI services. Of course, most of our AI stack is written in Python with frameworks such as Torch and PyTorch and TensorFlow. We expose all of them, including the training capability through Flask. We have, apart from the fact of workflow orchestration, Kubernetes and everything, we've written our main APIs to sort of be stable and robust to the throughput of the data that's coming in Java. We use Redis as an in-memory queuing-based system that works quite efficiently for us. And one of the things that we also ship is the fact that we ship an ELK container for our log monitoring so that customers can actually send us logs that we can work with, because we absolutely have no access to their systems. And we're also working with things like Prometheus and Grafana that we ship as well, along with our entire stack. On top of all of this, we've introduced Istio as well as a service mesh. We had a lot of battles with Istio. I mean, because we've been using Kubernetes for 3 years now. We're working with Nginx Ingress controllers of different versions, and then the new Istio Ingress doesn't work. And so we had to change a lot of things. But the cool part about getting Istio was it gives us better flexibility of application metrics. Again, because we are not on the cloud, it's very important that when it's running on the customer side, they can use a dashboard such as Kiali to actually tell us if the applications are working fine, if the application metrics are matching an SLA, and they can get back to us so that we can help them in whichever way they need. Yeah, I mean, some of the horror stories that we've had is we've had to install Kubernetes offline. So we basically took all the containers that run Kubernetes. And if you guys haven't installed Kubernetes by yourself without internet, I would definitely urge you guys to do it. You realize how cool it is, and the respect that you have for the open source community for bringing that through quite well. But it's difficult. Yeah, and then, yeah, I mean, it's working great for us. I have a slide that I just want to show with all our tech stack, but then I just decided not to, and just sort of talk about the entire experience. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it that we have. And the entire organization that we've gone through, and it's sort of evolving, is we sort of grouped ourselves into cross-functional teams like squads, the one that Spotify sort of follows, and we took the inspiration from them. So we had squads and chapters. So chapters are usually our entire data science team, our backend team, front-end team, that's sort of governing what tools and sort of protocols that we follow. Squads are basically implementation of product, features that are coming in. And then we're not big enough to have guilds, and chapters are working well for us. Squads is questionable, so we're still figuring out how to sort of work as a better organization unit. We have certain release processes built around this. Yeah, but that's pretty much what we're doing. And we also have some visualization tools that we've built in for working with machine learning models and orchestrating them and stuff. That's
cool. That's really good. Thank you. That was really insightful, actually. So I have questions from the audience here, but I will, maybe we can ask them in the end after Raj, because they are more for the group, so we can answer all at once. So guys, don't worry, I'm looking at it. We answer in the end. Maybe Raj, you want to go now and present your stack so we can discuss in the end?
Sure. So hi, I'm Raz. Basically, I'll try to rapid fire it so we can answer your questions, which is more interesting in my opinion. But I joined DeliveryHero, as I already said, 6 months ago, and actually had this fun opportunity to start something from scratch. So I'm going to tell you a bit of a story about how we did it. And because I'm a millennial, I have a presentation with unicorns and cat puns. I'll share that soon, but just to give you a bit of an info of what we have right now, at least infrastructurally, or at least spoiler, we chose Java. For a new squad we created. We technically kind of chose JVM and basically chose Java to boot it and Kotlin to continue for a backend service. But I'll kind of give you a bit more in the next to it. A bit of context first before I start with my slide. At DeliveryHero, we are now at a new stage in my career, for me at least. Tom mentioned that there is make it work. Make it work right, and then make it fast. I'm at make it fast because DeliveryHero right now is a very interesting point where we have around 1,600 developers worldwide. We're processing around 3 million orders a day, and it's scaling like crazy, meaning we're at least doubling in size each year. So we have to be on our tippy toes. We provide services that are working 24/7, so we need to be very diligent on our call. And I know we all like to say mistakes are actually positive and we learn from it, and I agree. But when you're at the startup mode, you need to remember that a mistake that you make, 2-3 users feel that if you're offline for a couple of minutes. At DeliveryHero, we're talking about millions if you like take 25 minutes to fix something problematic. So observability to production seems very important, and also a lot of different topics. But the fun part of this, making it work fast or actually optimize, is it's already working well. Meaning when I joined to a place where we were all services were completely living in isolation, using queues, fully on the cloud, using infra as code, basically using Terraform as infra as code, Helm charts to managing Kubernetes application. We have fully working Ops Genie for incident management. We're using BigQuery to actually move data from running application to where it actually should go later to use it. So we didn't keep historical data that we didn't need. Datadog, everything was already pre-booted and working fine. I try not to use acronyms, so I'll try to at least say, I'll drop some acronyms now, but I'll try to clarify a bit. So we are on AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. We're using Elasticache. We're using EKS, ECS, and ECR, which is the Kubernetes managed service, the containerized application, and the what's the ECR? Container, forgot.
Container registry.
Registry, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. Got coffee. So basically, as far as everything on the cloud, super easy. And now I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to share my deck. Share screen. I assume you now see a black loading page. But for some reason, my deck is dying here. Okay. Oh, okay. Let's try again. Okay, present mode doesn't work apparently. Do you see my screen still?
Yeah, we do, yeah.
Okay, awesome. So basically, it's time for a story. And I kind of made it a bit more story-like because this is really the workflow that I actually had to go through as well. So how to choose tech stacks and survive to talk about it in a meetup. And as I said, there will be some cat puns. Whenever you see this cat, feel free to take your left or right hand, whether if you're right-handed or left-handed, and just give yourself a good face palm. So before you ask, are you kidding me? A bit about myself. I already spoke about it, but parent, I'm a partner, an Ironman triathlon finisher. I'm a director of engineering, and I have a lot of fun life, which is talking about tech or writing about tech, or I don't know, kind of both. I'm a bit too active on Twitter, and I'm an aspiring author, or at least trying to. So it's going to be hysterical. So I thought to be practical. Honestly, I really did in the beginning thought I'm going to write my entire thought process and have a very simple map where everyone can follow like a script and give it to you the best answer for all your questions. So let's put our thinking cat on. And I got to something insane, like a crazy decision tree that I couldn't make sense of. It became a monstrosity. So I decided instead of that to kind of move to the next slide, meow, and basically break it down to questions instead of giving solutions. Meaning, let's basically understand one thing before we start this. My Java is bigger than your JavaScript is silly. We should all acknowledge that it's a dumb conversation. And religious about tools is silly. Like I don't see people building bridge, fighting about if their Makita drill is better than their whatever other one. I'm not a power tool person, sorry. I'm a developer, or at least I was before I was a manager. But examples of questions we actually should ask ourselves when we do that is, first of all, what are the SLAs that we need to maintain? What do people expect? And SLAs are service layer. Well, SLO is our objectives. A is attributes.
Agreements. Yeah.
But what are things that we actually, how do we measure our success? What is the goalpost that we actually get to say, oh, we're successful now? Also, what is the goal? What are we building? Like, is it front facing? Is it web? Is it actually internal? Then do we choose more practical over fancy looking? Do we try to attract people from it? These are questions that actually help us make the decision. Timeline. Timeline is really important. As Tom already mentioned, for a startup, as a person who had his own startup myself, first you try to make it work and you don't really care about most of those things. Timeline actually changes all those questions because timeline is the one that you ask, when should it be live? And then everything else is a compromise. Stability. If it's not at the startup phase, for example, stability actually matters if you are working at an organization that is, for example, processing around 3 to 4 million orders a day. And that's actually really interesting. Hireability is also another interesting part. One is, how can you actually can we get people in the market for it? Meaning you can actually, I'm coming from Israel, for example. In Israel, you can actually use C#. I think that's the most common one, most common language, or at least it was when I was living there 6 years ago. If you go to Berlin and you build a C# product, first of all, you're insane. Well, like, you'll find no one that is working on it. You're basically finding no one working on it here. And then you need to ask yourself, what's the motivation, right? And also trainability, meaning, again, with C#, the curve is relatively high. So if you can't hire anyone for it, how easy it is to train. So what's the motivation there, right? And that's basically the same thought process I went to when I joined DeliveryHero, because we had to create a service from scratch. It had to be live relatively quickly. And then I took all those questions that I asked myself, because I'm accountable to actually get this service done, and basically shared it with the team. I joined to a squad and I created basically a new squad, and I created a tribe or whatever the Spotify model is. We're not really following it, but we kind of use the jargon because we like to feel cool about it, but we are actually a group and different teams. And I asked the people in the team that I kind of inherited, how do they feel about all those questions? And we actually negotiated here. They came from Python background. They didn't feel very comfortable, but what we had to do is deliver something very fast. And we had to create a service that is really, really high performant, like extremely fast. We're talking about our current scores, for example, our median request and response are around 6 milliseconds, which is something that if we would have gone with Python, for example, we had to tweak Python to get. So we had to find something that out of the box gets us there so we can focus on business logic, which is also important. At the end of the day, we want to be business logic developers as much as possible. And we should actually take whatever gets us there as close as possible, because we understand our business better than we probably understand the infrastructure or the bare-boned ideas behind those languages. Okay, so you need to be positive, remember? And basically tell your team it's up to you, you're adults. And you need to experiment. We actually built a proof of concept and shared it. We actually played with trying to make something with Python work. We played with Java. We talked about hireability. We talked about trainability. And we also talked about our internal talent. Where I joined logistics, we at the end of the day actually got to either Golang or Java or JVM basically. And the entire discussion ended up by saying, we have currently a squad that's doing Python. Golang is probably the easier transition, but I also need to hire people, which are not really existing with Golang. Is a bit more difficult. And if I would do it with JVM based, I can actually take different developers from the organization and actually get them started now. And that's where we talked about priorities and timeline. We had to deliver something, an MVP, in about 3 months when I joined. So kind of take some risk to value benefit metrics here. And you basically say, okay, if it's either JVM based or it's Golang, if I can get people now to work on it, why not? The tool is basically what I need. And Golang and Java, they have a very similar throughput. I know memory management is a bit different, but at least for that regard, we didn't have to tweak anything in JVM to get our SLA working really well. So yeah, it's perfect. And basically the summary of what I'm trying to say is, it's about actually asking questions, not being religious. A manager, and also we need to be honest with ourselves. At least I am honest with myself. I've been a manager for like 6 years now. I am detached from actually writing code, and I'm not the person waking up in the middle of the night to clean it up, even though currently I'm part of the on-call rotation. But in reality, most of the times I'm not. So giving the development team the ability to take a look at those things, figure out what's right, and actually mention to them and be like the person mitigating the risks and mention, oh, this is more important than this one, or this this specific topic. Hireability probably is less important than actually hitting our timeline, or maybe they're connected. And being like the person to kind of navigate the conversation is where we should be, mitigate the risks, and actually also be fine to be challenged. Like let your developers tell you that you're wrong. As I said already, I'm a manager for 6 years. I am less than a developer than my developers, and kind of good to acknowledge that as well. And to say, you know what, you're going to wake up in the middle of the night. You know what you're doing. I'm just here to kind of clarify and crystallize what is the framework that we're working on. And that's it. I'm open for questions and done with my lovely presentation.
All right, cool. All right, thank you very much. Really good to see these insights. All right, so actually we have a few questions here from the audience. Most of them are directed to everyone. Let's start with the first one, which is more towards me, but also you guys can answer. Which is, Italy, you mentioned earlier, Golang is hard to recruit for. Do people agree? And what other technologies you all find hard to recruit for? So maybe let me put this into a different perspective. I think Golang is harder to hire for than, for instance, anyone from JVM or PHP world, because you know the pool of available developers in that area is way bigger than Golang. Also, the maturity of those technologies are, more advanced. Golang is from 2009, and it's now in the 11th year, which is great. And I think it's a language that has a huge potential, and it already proved itself, right? We see it in Docker, we see it in Kubernetes, we see it in Vault, in Terraform, everywhere. And I think it's just, there's a lot of people going into Golang right now, and they adventure themselves because they want to try out a new language. But Golang has a different paradigm than JVM, like Java, and a different paradigm than PHP. So when people go to Golang, they go with a different mindset, and until they get into the maturity of the language, or what we call the Go idiomatic way of writing code, that takes a while. And finding these people that already passed through that phase of getting to the, to the better standards that Go offer, that's what's hard to find. But you still can find a lot of people that play around with Golang and have huge potential to actually develop themselves in the language. At least that's what I think. But maybe what do you guys think?
I can add a bit to it. I mean, for us, it's generally hard to hire in Berlin, not primarily just because of the tech stack. I mean, all of us, if you look at everything that we've discussed about, most of us are using similar tech stacks. We're all on Kubernetes, we're doing microservices, gRPC, and rest. I think the problem for us is the fact that there are a lot of options to engineers in general in Berlin, and finding somebody on teams that are of different sizes requires different sort of cultures, and finding some engineers who can adapt to the fact that there are more unknowns than knowns, and depending on where you are in the journey of building a product in your organization, the maturity, there's a very big difference in terms of how you want to hire. So if you're a big company, well established, and you have a product vision for the next year or two, then you're really looking for people who will come and make a big mark in terms of changing some of your technology or making it better, scalable, going fast. But when you're in a company like, for example, the stage that Omnius is in, you would want people who are willing to change and adapt fast and think on their feet, rather than expecting that you're going to have a 6-month product building phase, and then there's going to be an acceptance phase, and then everything's going to be epics and user stories and tasks, and nobody's going to bother you. So I think for us, fundamentally, the culture and the mindset is a big issue to find in engineers on how we want to get them on team. And that makes some of our hiring processes or journeys quite long.
Yeah, I can add.
I'm sorry.
Agree.
So I agree. I would say that you also have to look at the stage of the company, right? Because that will dictate kind of the choices that you're making from an economic point of view. So, early stage companies, you kind of want to get results fast. You don't want to spend necessarily a lot of money, and that will inform the kind of hiring that you do. Those are my dogs, by the way. The later stage, right, once a company has actually adopted a real strategy, and most early stage companies, they don't have a strategy. Their strategy is survive. And once you've achieved that goal, then you have to really think about what your strategy is. That starts to inform the hiring as well. And I tend to hire not for the specific profile of the developer right now. I'm tending to hire for where that developer will bring me in 5 years, right? I'm looking for someone who is capable of actually sort of dragging the rest of the organization along with them into this sort of future unknown, rather than trying to fill a specific role that one team is asking for. So when one of the teams says, hey, we need another Go developer, because I'm more thinking, okay, well, that might meet your initial short-term goal of having, an extra person to achieve your velocity as a team. But is it really going to get us to where we need to go as far as the company's vision is concerned? And those are almost never the same thing. So those things should be also considered when you're hiring. That said, there's a pretty bad signal to noise ratio in Berlin. So we go outside of Berlin quite often, and we'll move people here to get really good talent.
Yeah, I would say also from my perspective, the specific syntax of a developer when you're hiring a developer is the least important thing if you're hiring for long-term developers. Meaning, if you're at a very startup-y phase and you're hiring for people that will probably work for you for a year, 90% of the time you crash and burn, then you probably need people to develop something and know what they're doing. If you have a long runway and you know that you can train and grow people, mindset is more important. Culture, fit and benefit, meaning there needs to be a culture fit to what you do, but also added benefit that they bring to that culture, like where you want to be. And that's most of the times not hard skills. It's basically more soft skills, or being positive, or a go-getter, or a person that, I don't know, it's different. Like I had once a team that was taking risk all the time, and I had to bring a person that will actually calm them down and maybe not use beta on production on every occasion. And in other cases, it was bringing some people who were like more startup mindset and were driving things forward. So those always were more important to me than whether a person wrote a line of code in Go or something else. The only kind of slight thing I would say is it's more for me the paradigm. Like a person coming in from functional probably to OOP will be very difficult to integrate, and the other way around. But if a person did Java or C# and moving now to PHP, or I don't know if that transition ever happens, but if it does, it doesn't really matter. It's same. Syntax is easy to learn.
Totally. Yeah, agreed. Cool. So I have another question for the group from Philip. So if you could start on a greenfield tomorrow and build the same product you have today, what would you do or design differently from an architecture and maybe also organizational aspect?
I can take a crack. I wouldn't change much on the architecture, though. We're very proud of what we've done on the architecture side, but on the organization side, I mean, we did a lot of shit shows, and excuse the expression or the phrase. I mean, we've learned a lot of things down the line, and these are things that you learn only through the process of building and seeing that your development is better than your organization, and it starts to clearly show, and it does. Engineers start to complain about the chaos, about everything that's there. I mean, the way we organize teams, the way we did agile cadences, the idea of bringing in OKRs, and how to like sort of use it. Does it even make sense to use OKRs in your organization just because it's cool? How does it fit together for the vision? Release process, I think one of the things that's really coming to bite us right now is the fact that having a good release process that sorts of works on different fronts and angles where you can constantly deliver and be agile. These are definitely things that we would change. But with that said, it's always 50-50, right? It's always in retrospect. I mean, we survived a lot of things. So now I'm in the situation where I say, these are things that I could correct. But looking back, you never really have the time to correct these things. I mean, if you'd corrected these things, there was a very big chance that we would have actually not developed the product because we spent a lot of time on the organization part of it. So my suggestion is keep fixing things. It's a continuous process. You can't really change stuff no matter you start greenfield. You're going to make different mistakes. You just learn from it and see what you can do. But the biggest thing is believe in your team. Don't try to be this, like even if you're leading the team, don't try to be Captain America, I guess, and sort of try to take everything on. Believe in the team that they can make decisions. Like Ras put it, they are adults. They can really face what they're doing. So just believe in them, get feedback from them, do continuous learning. And if you go into the position where you say you're the one who knows everything, everybody has to follow, your team might be happy initially, but then everybody's going to leave. And yeah.
I'll just add to that. I for sure would have a different approach altogether to doing it, but I admit that it would be also wrong, right? And because you really only hate what you've done in the past. If you're a healthy mindset developer, you look at what you did a year ago and you just say that's crap, because you know you can do better because you have been growing. I think sort of dwelling on those questions, I don't know how productive it is at the end of the day. I think really sort of like a fail forward and just constantly improve mindset is probably the better one, rather than trying to assess, you know, what the perfect system could have been, because it's never going to be perfect.
Yeah, it's my favorite interview question, by the way. I ask candidates what, like, a mistake you've actually implemented in the past, how would you implement it now, and then let's pair program it, which kind of shows for me the concept of growth, but also the ability to actually see if a person was connected to where the goalpost is. So I would say, if you ask me the same question now, and you say, I still have the same goalpost, like I still need to deliver in 3 months, I would say, Yeah, we've made a lot of mistakes, but we actually deliver to production on time. The service is live. So if you tell me that the goalpost is at a different place, then I will probably have a very different solution. Probably would go with Golang, actually. So this entire conversation really depends on is it the same terms as it was before or not? And as far as architectural decisions that we've made a lot of really weird, bad ones to get to production on time. And now we're cleaning up. But again, if I wouldn't have done it, I wouldn't have gone to production on time. So it really depends. I think the best thing that I think we as a team did very well with the product manager is we actually mentioned that in advance. We're taking a loan now to deliver really fast. You owe us that time after to clean up. And that's where we're at right now. So we have been cleaning crew for we developed in 3 months, and now we are cleaning crew for 3 months. And we got to the point now that it actually looks fine. So it actually took us 3 months to deliver and then 3 months to clean up, which is, if I have 6 months now in the beginning, I probably would have done it. And we as a team would have done it perfectly in 4 months. But that's the problem. The goalpost just moved.
Absolutely, yeah. Cool. It's the trade-offs, I think. All right. Cool. Let's go to the next question then. So, any experience with Istio and other service meshes, and what about GitOps? So, I can give my take here on Istio. We use Istio for about 1.5 years, more or less, and we've been through some good and some very bad things. Istio, as I said in the early beginnings, it's an edge, kind of a edge technology. It's there, it's new. Although it has a huge community, and the community helped us a lot, I have to say. If it wasn't for them, we would have very big problems. So, I mean, currently we're good because we got experience. So it's one of those questions that we just answered. Like, it's a technology that we chose. If I could have chosen another one before, maybe I would, but I wouldn't have learned it. So now I know exactly like where to go with Istio. And also I know exactly what not to do with Istio so far, like upgrading to the latest version, just because. So, like running Istio right now, I think it was the best choice in terms of maturity of service meshes for us. The whole team is more comfortable with Istio today than like a year ago, of course. But also when there's a new developer joining, the learning curve is something complicated here. Istio is not easy to understand when you first join, the whole process of thinking how a service mesh works. So my take here is that you should understand the concept and not the technology, because then you can actually move forward faster and, smarter. Is there anybody else? I heard Istio before, I don't know, but
yeah,
anybody?
I have also experience with Istio, and I think exactly the same experience. So just one example on hiring, right? So we were like, I was like trying to hire like a lot of Java engineers in the past. And for us, it was, of course, culture and like all those aspects. But of course, because we were migrating to Kubernetes, we wanted to have some people not necessarily experienced with Kubernetes, but at least knowing this concept at all, like how this whole orchestration works, and like why having state inside of the container is probably not a good idea, and stuff like that. And that was the biggest challenge. So here comes the challenge. Do you have any people with your specific technology who know this concept of service meshes, right? Same was before, I don't know, 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, about event buses and event-driven systems. Same concept, same problem.
Cool, totally. All right, next one. So Datadog or self-built? Anybody?
I guess it really depends on the use case. I mean, I would always suggest, if there's something that you can buy or use from the open source community, at that point in time, don't try to reinvent it. I mean, you can't be the smartest person in the room ever. So I would always suggest, depending on your use case and how you want to go about things, make a choice of technology. Don't let it come from a person. I think it should always be from a group of people who sort of butt it out and come up with a thought process on why certain thing would make sense for you right now, 2 years from now or 6 months from now might not make sense. I would always suggest to go with community stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff in the open source world that you can make use of, that you can share, folk and do stuff as long as the licenses are cool. Yeah, I mean, Datadog is really cool too. I mean, the millions of users of Datadog. So there isn't much I can ask. I cannot tell people to not use it. It's cool.
True. Yeah. I mean, I had experience both with Datadog and also Prometheus stack. And we started with Datadog because, as you said, you know, if you can buy and you can run it there, it's already there. So it's easier. We only changed to Prometheus when we start having scalability issues, like because Datadog uses statsd basically as the way to send information. Statsd, depending on your setup, could be unreliable if you don't know really what you're doing. And that was our case. So we were more comfortable with a Prometheus setup, which is a pooling kind of system. And that was the changing point for us. But I think it's more regarding experience, and our team didn't have much experience with statsd and the way to push metrics. So we chose, okay, we have more experience with Prometheus. Let's go with Prometheus. But of course, that comes with other trade-offs. You have to maintain Prometheus. So it's always a choice.
On that one on top, actually the difference like with it when it comes to monitoring systems, exactly that, like push or pull, like which concept do you have? And it's extremely hard to change between those, whereas it's not that hard to change if you like switching from push to push.
Exactly, yeah, that's a very good point. Absolutely. Cool, all right, so we have another question here from Matt. So one problem I've run into before and is when trying out new technologies. It can be easy to get stuck after selecting a platform or language that is hard to recruit for. How have you all handled this? Do you try to upskill your team? Do you try to find a different technology to use or something else? I think most of you already answered sort of this, but if you want to add to this, feel free. Or not.
I make jokes like you're not allowed to use Haskell. And you know, usually that avoids using some obscure language where you might not be able to support it in the future. But even if you do, right? Even if you write something in Haskell, if the blast radius is really small, if it's not part of like the critical path of systems, and it's very easy for somebody to grok it, like look at it and say, I understand what's going on there, and then just replace it with some other language, that's still an acceptable way of maintaining code, right? So you should seek the smallest footprint possible that the code is still maintainable, even by somebody who is not necessarily a functional programmer or understands that kind of pattern matching. But we do have people in-house that could still help with it. Like I'm a functional programmer. That tends to actually influence the decisions that I make about how I architect things. And there's some validity to that approach that should rub off on object-oriented programmers as well. But for sure, like, yeah, you want to avoid the weird, obscure, esoteric language that nobody's willing to touch in the future if you can.
Good, that's a good advice.
Yeah, and as far as upskilling the team, I would say, not fully relevant to this. You always want to do that. I mean, if your team is not learning and growing, whether it's in the path that they're on right now or a new path, then they're basically moving backwards. So I would say as a manager, that's the main part of your role. If you have a team of people, you need to keep them motivated. You need to kind of get their retention to be more towards the 4-year than the 2. And you need to keep them growing and learning. And if you even take something like old school as Java, like you can actually get people to go deep into JVM and how it works internally. And that's probably a direction that you can go, or you can actually get them to learn, I don't know, Elixir, for example, and develop some stuff there.
Cool. Also agree with that. All right, we have another question here from Hemant. So for everyone, were there any new product technologies you introduced to your team due to the current situation, or anything you stopped using or considering so? In my case, Istio was something that at some point I was, I had a doubt, should I change this technology right now or not. But I was already too deep in, and I was like, well, now it's better worth to upskill the team and, you know, actually invest on it. And I think that was the right decision to do it. Maybe it was the wrong one, I don't know, but for us, it's working well. Do you have any cases like this as well?
Was the question when Hemant said current situation, do we mean the COVID-19 situation?
I thought so as well, but
okay.
I don't think that was the case.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I mean, for sure, the current situation informs a lot of what we do. We've gotten into a very like cost consciousness, cost saving mode, and cutting things out that we don't need to do that isn't actually adding any value to the business. And for sure, some things have died, probably a necessary death as a result. But I don't think that we singled them out because of the original technology decision. It was just based on the business itself.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, cutting costs, I think, especially in this time, was also something we started looking more into it, which we didn't before. So definitely that was a huge change. Cool. There's another one, like anyone using Rust? No, I don't have much experience with Rust. Anybody there?
No, absolutely no.
I code in Go, and when I try to code in Rust, it makes my head hurt. So.
Yeah, something similar.
I'm an old person. Everything that looks like C for me or C++, I'm like, no, thank you. I don't want to declare those things. I'm gone.
Cool. Okay, question from Alexander. We're reaching the end here. So does anyone have individual remote engineers or non-remote teams that work mostly remote? In my case, yes, I have people remote, which now it's even like, you know, like with the current situation, with the COVID situation, it's even enhanced a little bit more. I think the COVID situation helped us understand that we have to document more things that we do and decisions that we take, because people that were remote before, that were suffering because most of the decisions we did was in the office and barely communicated through proper documentation or through a proper process. So we had to get those together and this time to make it work. So that's my current experience in the company that I work. What about you? Anybody with remote teams or remote people? Not now, but I mean,
not currently. At Wikimedia, my previous employer, we had around 70% in Germany on-premise, co-located, and 30% was remote. But funnily enough, Wikimedia is a very large organization that is distributed, and 80% of employees of Wikimedia are remote. I would say it's a whole lot of challenge, and it kind of forces everyone to first agree on what the expectation set from each other is. Also invest on toolings, which are actually, by the way, toolings that I took to my new position as well. Like doing retrospectives with Post-its is not a thing that you can do with, I don't know, like if you have 30% of your team remote, right? So we started using retrospective toolings like Team Retro or something. Not that I'm plugging it, I'm not related to it, just a tool we use. But it actually became so much better that when I joined DeliveryHero, when we were all co-located, we still used it because it's better. It goes directly to our Jira board. It works well. And then when we all went remote, like our tribe was better equipped to handle that because we were already doing VS Code live at some places at least, or we're playing with so many remote tools. I would say that actually adopting remote processes if you're co-located makes your team a bit more efficient because you tend to at least be more explicit. Explicit is what this meeting is for, like create an agenda, or keep track of the minutes of a meeting and then share it publicly. So people that didn't join, or if you talked about something in a hallway, just share that written. Even if you're not remote, it kind of, I don't know, I don't like the transparency word, mostly because I think it's overused, but in the name of building trust, it's a really nice tool to do if you share everything that you kind of get to happen and it's publicly available somewhere. Whether you call it transparency or not, I would say it's a trust building exercise.
Cool. All right, so we have our last question from Oleksky, something like that. So you mentioned that your teams are making experience with tech stack. Are you practicing running A/B tests, maybe even for live traffic, for different tech stacks to select the best approach? I mean, I do A/B testing with different containers using Istio, that's one of the good advantages of using Istio. We do canary releases with, you know, a different, an application that was written in PHP, and then we can actually do with Go. That is easy to do now with Istio, now that we know how to do it. But we don't do that very often, to be honest. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we've recently started these things called as death matches, where we currently have the performance of the tech stack that we are working with, and we decide to change something. For example, we've been looking for alternatives for Airflow right now for a few different reasons, and we've been looking at something that's almost very similar to work with and easier to sort of compose pipelines with this tool called as ZB. I mean, for us, we don't do it on live traffic though. We still try and evaluate it, not just based on how good it handles live traffic. It's how easy is it for the current team to work with the technology? What's like sort of the learning barrier? Because every time you introduce a new technology to the team, the most important thing to understand is if you're not around, and let's say you're a small team, can somebody pick it up if there is a situation? So we try to sort of look at the learning barrier or the curve that's required for it. And of course, we have certain SLAs that we measure against to see if the new tech stack is working as expected on all of these criteria, and then sort of decide if we want to move into that direction or not.
Cool, all right. Very good advice. Okay, so I mean, those were the last questions, but there are two more that I think we can answer before we finish. We still are within our time frame. So question to all, is remote hiring still going on in COVID-19 situation as I'm in India? For us, yes, remote hiring is still a case. The challenge here is the timing when you're going to join. That's basically the barrier right now. Cool. And the next question, how about CI/CD? What kind of tools you're using?
I mean, for us, I can maybe go first and keep it short. We're using Jenkins, but because we are mostly not on the cloud, we've sort of created a build graduation environment in our own office. Like we have a small data center that we are running. So we have like a PR environment, a staging environment, and QA environment. We follow sort of the Git branching mode. And as part of the CI, it does whatever it's supposed to do with SonarQube and everything that's integrated. And then the CD is deploying on these environments based on the sort of graduation step that needs to happen. It's a constant thing that we're trying to improve. Of course, with the use of Helm, so we have Helm templates, so it's easier to deploy. So we have local templates for each of the microservice, and then we have like a master template for our entire application that we deploy when it's graduated to the QA environment. There are different policies that you can follow. Jenkins is good, but if you're on the cloud and you can afford it, at least from my point of view, I like Circle CI better. I like the idea of orbs that people are putting in the community that you can use. And Jenkins gives you the capability to do and fix and manage everything yourself, which is incredible if you want to walk down that path. But if you want to be fast and sort of have lesser code to deal with, lesser systems, I would definitely prefer Circle CI, but we can't use it in our environment right now. So Jenkins is good for us.
Cool.
Interestingly,
right.
we've built one based on concept of GitLab, but based on Jenkins. Jenkins was too flexible for us, so we had to like really, it was all generated out of templates end to end. And with all this experience building it, we actually now migrating to GitLab.
Okay, that makes sense.
Honestly, GitLab is the best experience I had as far as CI/CD. Oh, we're not doing GitLab. I'm a bit embarrassed to say that we are not doing CI/CD right now. We are going to start with Drone and Spinnaker, but currently, because time limitations, we are doing command line, manual deployments, old school. Keeps all of us really grounded, but soon enough, hopefully it will change.
Yeah, for us, we were in Drone before as well, and Drone was really good. I really liked it. the main issue for us, again, we're a small team, and maintaining drone in Kubernetes requires, some capacity there. And we decided then to change to a very different one, which is GitHub Actions. And it's working really well so far, especially because of the community. It deploys to Kubernetes and Helm charts really well. I really liked it. Don't have many complaints there, although I have very good experience with GitLab CI as well. It's a definitely very mature and good one. Cool. So that answers 2 questions here. Especially for Cube, I would recommend either GitLab CI, which is good, or GitHub Actions. Take a look. And the last one, how can I connect with you all? I think we forgot to say how to connect. I think Raj was the only one that actually put it on his slide. So just share your social networks and we can finish for today.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to jump back in as well. Sorry, guys. Oh, can you see my video? Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Just just to add to that about the connecting thing, thanks everyone for joining. If anyone's got any questions for the panelists, they can message me. I'm going to send a feedback email around, and also you can, if you connect with me on LinkedIn, just shoot me the questions over and I'll direct them over to the panelists. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining, and also thanks to Italo, Tom, Raz, Nischal and Ilya for all joining us tonight. It's been really great. I've really enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else has as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the opportunity. It was really good to meet you all.
Good.
Yeah, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay,
Be
have
safe.
a lovely
Ciao,
evening,
ciao.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.